This week's episode is brought to you by my new sponsor, which I am so pleased to announce, dadhair.us. I was selected from a large pool of candidates to be their next spokesman, and I am honestly this is flattering. This is like literally making a dream come true for me, so thank you so much, dadhair.us. Dadhair.us is the leading advocate for the continuation and adoption of the dad hair hairstyle, and some previous sponsors have been Aaron Rodgers circa 2009, J.K. Simmons pretty much all the time, and my predecessor, Jamie Lee Curtis. Thanks again, dadhair.us, for making me your latest spokesman. Dad Hair. Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Government Update with Nate. I am Nate, and I'll try to give you all the facts that I can find, as always, on politicians and government, and I'll try to give you those facts straight. Let's begin. So before I start today's episode, I wanted to pause for a moment and say thank you to all of you who have been viewing my episodes. I've been getting some great numbers, more so than I even ever expected to be getting this early in the game. So I really appreciate everyone that's been viewing my channel. It's very humbling and amazing to see all the different views that I'm getting across the country. This is honestly amazing. This is a life dream for me. So thank you so much for viewing and continuing to view. I look forward to seeing you on future episodes like today's. As a sign of appreciation for all the viewers that I'm getting, I decided to do my next episode on the state that gives me the most views week in and week out, and that state happens to be Illinois. Who'd have thought? Illinois gives me the most views week in and week out, so this week's episode will be on the Senate race that's currently going on in Illinois. Oh, Illinois, am I ready for you? Let's get started, baby. The Senate race in Illinois is heating up, and over the next two episodes, I'll be covering the incumbent and the challenger for the U.S. Senate race that's currently going on in the state of Illinois. For today's episode, we'll be focusing on the 5 key votes for the incumbent candidate in Illinois. He's a former Navy reservist that made his living as an attorney. He was first elected back in 2010 election cycle on a special election to fill the seat vacated by current President Barack Obama. And he has a first name that's a last name and a last name that's a first name. It is Republican Senator Mark Kirk. It is definitely worth noting that while Mark Kirk was in the Navy Reserves, he achieved the rank of commander. So for the remainder of this episode, I'm of course going to refer to him as Commander Kirk. As always, let's start off the episode with some fun facts and figures on productivity, everyone's favorite segment. It is time for those statistics. Commander Kirk ranked very highly among Senate Republicans in terms of co-sponsoring bills. Of the 216 bills that Commander Kirk co-sponsored, 42% of them were introduced by somebody other than a Republican. That landed him second amongst Senate Republicans and 12th highest among all senators in general. In number of bills introduced, Commander Kirk ranked 7th highest among Republicans and 12th highest among the entire Senate by introducing 46 bills and resolutions in year 2015. Finally, CK ranked a little bit lower in this last statistic because of the 46 bills and resolutions that he introduced, only 2 of them got out of committee and made it to the Senate floor, which ranked him 44th out of the entire Senate in terms of getting bills out of committee. We are done with the sexy statistics right now, so let's move on to Kirk's 5 key votes. Number 1 is the Iran nuclear deal. Just so you know, I had to practice pronouncing nuclear because I was afraid that I was going to come out nuclear, and we don't want that. HR 1191, a bill to provide congressional review and oversight of agreements relating to Iran's nuclear program and for other purposes. Nice and open-ended. Which was a bill that required President Barack Obama to provide details of Iran's nuclear deal and gave Congress 60 days to review it and to approve it, disapprove it, or have no action taken. Commander Kirk voted in favor of this bill along with 97 other senators, which clearly passed and became a law. Number 2 is an oldie but a goodie. We've talked about HR 2048 in the past, which was a bill that reformed the Patriot Act by terminating bulk collection of data and increasing transparency among foreign surveillance. I wanted to highlight it with Commander Kirk's voting record, as he was one of 22 Republicans to vote in favor of this bill, which ultimately passed and did become a law, but not a lot of his peers voted along with him. On to number 3, which is the fiery subject of gun law. Did you see what I did there? We've talked about Senate Amendment 2908 in previous episodes as well. This is the Public Safety and Second Amendment Rights Protection Act of 2015. This amendment looked to limit the sale and transfer of firearms to only licensed individuals or organizations, and also increase the background checks on those transactions that took place at gun shows. Commander Kirk was a co-sponsor of this amendment, one of only 4 Republicans to be in favor of this bill, which ultimately did not pass and did not get added to the law. The fourth key vote is on immigration. Senate Bill 744, the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act, was a very large immigration reform bill that had a ton of provisions within it. Of the thousands of provisions that were found in this bill, the main provision of this bill was that it granted provisional immigration status to those who submitted an application and paid a bunch of taxes and fees and passed background checks and etc. Met a bunch of other criteria, but basically it granted provisional immigration status to those who came forward. Mark Kirk voted in favor of this bill, one of only 14 Republicans to do so, which ultimately passed the Senate, but did not go any further than that. It was stopped in its tracks. The fifth and final key vote is going to get a little stormy, as it's on the National Flood Insurance. God, I am so punny. Get ready for this jargon because there's a lot of words in this bill text. Senate Bill 1926 delays the implementation of certain provisions of the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2012 and amends the National Association of Registered Agents and Brokers Bill. So here's a little bit of background on the National Flood Insurance Program. So the National Flood Insurance was started all the way back in 1988 to cover a gap for homeowners vulnerable to floods. Essentially, the government looked at homeowners that were victims of floods and saw that they were unable to repair or rebuild their homes after a flood, and it was causing a lot of displacement, and it was a bad time for people that were victim of floods. If a flood happened, homeowners back then were unable to claim any benefits on their insurance policies because floods simply weren't covered. So the government came up with the National Flood Insurance Program. Let's flash forward 60 years to current day, and the program is in debt. It is in a lot of debt, so much so that they needed to reform certain aspects of it, like subsidies associated with it and also increasing some insurance rates that reflect the actual risk that are associated with properties that are in flood zones and just stuff like that. That's where the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2012 came in, and it looked to reform the program with the aforementioned changes. However, let's make a full circle back to Mark Kirk's fifth and final key vote, and that's on Senate Bill 1926, which wanted to put a hold on some of those reforms that were found in the 2012 law. Commander Kirk voted against this bill along with 31 other senators, 30 of whom were Republicans. They wanted to keep those reforms in place. They didn't want to roll those back. The bill ultimately did pass and become a law despite their best efforts. Alright, that is all I have for you today on this week's episode of Government Update with Nate on Commander Kirk's voting record. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and tune in to next week's episode where we look at Commander Kirk's challenger, Tammy Duckworth. I did not make that name up.